Ooh, hold on. Salam.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Well, how are you? It's been a while.
Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khair for joining us today and for that interesting topic, mashallah.
I know, yes, I try to pick things that I feel like people really are looking for, and can just benefit from. So,
Alhamdulillah. And we do have, mashallah, already attendees coming in.
okay.
So we should go ahead and start and then we will take the questions at the end or
Okay.
however you prefer.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We can do that. Yeah. There should be time at the end, I would think. So,
Inshallah. Okay, let's do that. So we'll begin with the dua. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad barik wa sallim. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. We pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring barakah in this effort, and may all of you who are here, thank you for joining us today, benefit from this lecture. And I will hand over to Sister Lubna Ali. She has, mashallah, been with us for throughout this program. She's always contributed with her expertise in marriage counseling, and she sees a lot of couples in her practice, and also I think kids and families in general, and whatever the topics of interest of the community is struggling through, and she has noticed some things, she always comes up and wants to present it to for the benefit of the community, mashallah, and the ummah, inshallah. So do you have slides, Lubna, to share today?
so I don't have slides now, but I can afterwards. I can give like maybe like some,
The
you know,
PDF like we
tips
do
for people.
usually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Inshallah, let's do that. So usually what will happen is, for all those who are attending and will listen later, we will be posting this on YouTube, and then usually Sister Lubna sends us the
Mhm.
link to her material, and we do put that on that YouTube, so
Mhm.
you can watch it after also. So I will give it to her now, inshallah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Well, Ramadan Mubarak to everybody too. So I know that, most people are fasting and everything, so just wanted to say Ramadan Mubarak. Assalamu alaikum. I'm here to talk today about the true hard work of love and relationships. I know it can definitely be challenging at times. I think most of us have experienced that in our relationships, to have a healthy, loving, fulfilling relationship. And hopefully today you guys can pick up some tips and tools to do whatever is in your control to help your relationship be more fulfilling and to try to have it go as smoothly as possible. So, in the first part, we're going to talk about some of the challenges of love and how we can take a different approach to it, different from what we've been taught in the movies and fairy tales, all that stuff. And then the second half, we're going to go over a little bit of 6 key ingredients that will help love bloom into a thriving relationship. So, stay tuned for that towards the end part. So, because I always want you to take away some things that you can actually use in your real life. So, all right. So, Alain de Botton's essay, Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person, is one of the most read articles in the New York Times of recent years. So, it is already a very catchy title, as you can imagine, Why You Will Marry the Wrong Person. So, it just goes to show how hard relationships can be, those intimate partnerships. He's the founder of the School of Life. Maybe you guys have heard of him, or listened to some of his videos on YouTube. And he is an author. And what he says is, as people and as a culture, we would be much saner, so much healthier in our thinking and happier if we re examined our very view of love. So I want you guys to kind of think about, what is my view of love? Like, even if you were to reflect on it, it would be nice if like we could actually like be chatting and stuff, to kind of be hearing. But if you want to even put it in the chat or something, you can do that too. But really think about, what is my view of love? Because when we think about that, we can re-examine, oh, well, okay, like, is this really the healthiest way for me to be thinking, or the most realistic way? So what Alain de Botton says is that love is something we have to learn and we can make progress with, and that it's not just an enthusiasm, not just, oh, a feeling or a passion, it's a skill. So just like you would learn anything else, it is a skill. That's probably not what you guys think of when you think of, oh, like what is my view of love? Oh, it's a skill I can learn how to be better at. No, but it is a skill. So, and I'm sure that, in your own lives, you've noticed how, oh, well, maybe I think this is loving or this is my view of love. But wait, what can I do differently? And maybe you've already had some adjustments that you've made in your relationship. So that's important to point out. So it is something that we can learn. So it requires forbearance, generosity, imagination, and a million other things. And we all know, of course, that love is rocky and bumpy at the best of times. And the more generous we can be towards that flawed humanity, because we are all human, we all have flaws, nobody's perfect, the better chance we'll have of doing the true hard work of love. Okay. So yes, so we know it's going to be rocky and bumpy. That's just kind of a given. And the more generous that we can be towards that flawed humanity, then the easier it's going to be for us to be doing the work of love. So, all right. So I want you all to reflect on how generous you think you are of your partner when they falter. So just kind of think about that for a little bit. Like, how generous am I when they don't do this, or when they hurt my feelings, or they talk in a snappy way or whatever? Like, how generous am I in thinking about it? So I imagine probably not very generous, but this is what, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, how that can help in your relationship. Okay. So I know that even for me, if everything is going well in my life, like let's say I'm feeling really healthy, my career is going well, my kids are doing well, my social life, everything, if my husband and I are not in the best place, like if there's like a negative, maybe something, tension or something going on, because whatever, maybe he did something, I did something, it colors everything else for me. So like this is why the work and why this work in particular, this work of love and new perspective is just so important because it has such a profound effect on our quality of life. So, so I don't know if you guys experience that, but that is definitely something that I've seen in with my clients, just even in my own personal life, that the relationship has such a profound effect on other parts of your life. So that's why it's important to be doing this work. And that's one of the reasons why I usually do talk about intimate relationships, because I know it's something that people, we do struggle with, all of us, me included at times. So, all right. So first we're going to talk about the idea of normal love. So what's striking here is that our idea of what love is, what's normal in love, is actually not so normal. So, sometimes we punish ourselves for not having a normal love life, or even though no one seems to have any of these, like when we talk, and of course, I know obviously this is the masjid. So like, I'm going to talk from an Islamic perspective and, make sure that I'm, keeping that in consideration, because it can be different based on different, cultures or communities that I'm talking to. So I know that sometimes relationships in, Islam can be arranged, and we have different view of going into marriage. At the same time, there are still certain desires, needs, and expectations that for most of us are, part of us yearns for. So yeah, so keep in mind there's the, Islamic perspective there. At the same time, there's also similar desires going on no matter what the culture is. So a lot of us, we have this ideal of what love is, and then these very unhelpful narratives of love. And they're everywhere. Movies, songs, fairy tales, all of that. Like I'm sure you guys know, like, Cinderella, Disney movies, all of that stuff. You guys, I'm sure, are aware of just those messages that they send us, like this conditioning that, oh, okay, like love is going to be like this or that, or. But if you say to people, look, love is painful, a poignant, touching attempt by two flawed individuals, okay? So that's the important part. Two flawed individuals to try and meet each other's needs in situations of gross uncertainty and ignorance about who they are and about who the other person is. And we're just going to try our best. Like, what if you guys went into that? Like, even let's say if you're getting a rishta or something, or like, are you going into it thinking that? Or are you thinking, oh, this person is going to be so amazing, whatever, all of this? Like, are you going in? This person thinks that they know themselves. I think I know myself. But you know what? No, we're going to learn so much more. And we learn so much more in love and relationships by actually being in an intimate relationship. Like I know for me, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm learning this more about myself, and I didn't even know. And so, and what we're going to do, we're just going to try our best with two flawed individuals. So I want you guys to think like, do you really think that going into, being in your relationship? So, and that's a more generous starting point. So, meaning if you know I am flawed, and you are flawed. We have our own stuff and we think we know what's going to happen or we're going to try our best. We're just going to try our best. Going into it, it's actually more realistic then, as opposed to the messages we get sent, about all these, oh, love is supposed to be like this or that. If you kind of think of it in this way, I know it's not as romantic or anything, but it's just more realistic. So, the acceptance of ourselves as flawed creatures seems to be what love really is. So, um, so love is at its most necessary when we are weak, when we feel incomplete. This is when we must show love to one another at these points. And it's not easy, like what we want to do sometimes if we get hurt, or when we're feeling weak, we want to close up, right? I know that I have a tendency to do that at times. And as I've obviously been working on myself and, you know, trying not just being here preaching, I also really do try to implement everything that I'm telling clients and, other people. Like, how can you not close up as much? Even if you want to close, like if your partner says something to you, you want to close up, how can you still show some love? How can that's going to be healing on your end. It's not easy, but that's a challenge. I really would want all of you in your own lives because I know we have that tendency. I know the way that I was raised, like if someone was mad, they just wouldn't talk. They would give like, silent treatment. I think in our community, in our culture, like it is very common to do that. And it's like, how healthy is that? It's not. We know that it's not. So if you can try to not close up as much, I know you want to close, but if you try to not close up as much, that's going to help you just be healing your own self. And it's just part of the work of love where we're going to hurt each other in any intimate relationship. We're going to fail sometimes and that's okay though. So I know it's not easy, but it's like if you know this happens, how can we do it differently? Okay. So De Botton, he says, a wiser culture than ours would recognize that the start of a relationship is not the high point that romantic art assumes. It is merely the first step of a far longer, more ambivalent, and yet quietly audacious journey on which we should direct our intelligence and scrutiny. So we don't just want to be interested in that moment that gets us into love or like, the beginning period, all of that. Like, yes, of course, it's exciting and all of that, At the same time, this is not the high point of the relationship. It's just merely it's the start, okay? And what we're interested in here, and hopefully people who have emotional relationship maturity, is we're interested in the survival of love over time. So, as I talked about a little bit before this, just being realistic about your own view of what love is, two flawed individuals they think they know themselves, they think they know the other person. We're just trying to make it work, right? And being generous with the other person too in your perception of their flaws. Okay? So how do we do this? How can we, you know, better our chances of the survival of love over time? So this is where, I mean, therapy can definitely help, it's the inner work. This is the thing. When I have couples come in to see me, it's like sometimes one will be like, okay, I mean, they don't say it in these words, but I can tell, okay, I want you on my side so that you can change the other person to be, and I say straight up, no, okay, our relationship, 1 + 1 = 2, right? So me plus you equals our relationship. Are you bringing a healthy individual, a healthy number one to the equation? Okay. And in order to do that, you have to do that inner work. You just have to. You can't be putting, oh, well, our relationship isn't healthy. The sum isn't healthy because of you and your own stuff. No, that's not. We have to be willing to look at ourselves. And you know what? It's not easy to do that. But I will tell you guys, if you want to have a better relationship and do better at love and having a long-standing, fulfilling relationship, you have to be willing to look at yourselves. And I know it's not easy. So, inner work. So, what does it take to love over a long span of time? It is doing that inner work and being willing to look at yourself, not just pointing the finger at the other person. Okay. So, these days, and I wonder if some of you have said this, I have a feeling because I have said it myself, not in so many words. So, one of the greatest insults you can say to your partner is, I want to change you. Okay. Have any of you thought this before? I know I have. Ha ha ha. Okay. Have you ever thought secretly that the relationship is a project of improvement? You know, I think this is something that most of us can recognize. So instead, if you adopt a view of love based around education, so, what love means then is love is a benevolent process whereby two people try to teach each other how to become the best versions of themselves. They're committed to increasing the admirable qualities that and characteristics that the person possesses and the other person possesses. So instead of, oh, well, I want to change you, you know, instead, can you think, you know what? I want to just help bring up the most positive characteristics that you have. I want to help bring that out in you, just like you can help bring that out in me. Okay. So, do any of you look at your partner this way and appreciate when they are trying to give you feedback on, maybe something, maybe like a challenge you have or something? Like, do you guys ever look at your partner in that way where you're actually appreciative of the feedback? Like, if they're saying, "Oh, you know what? I think you struggle with this or that or whatever, like I think, maybe you're not as organized or maybe you're not, as scheduled or whatever it is, like, are you open to hearing it or do you get defensive when they're sharing something? Because it's not easy. It's easier to get defensive. But if you go into love seeing that, you know what, they're trying to bring out my best characteristics or they're trying to help me be better in ways, can I be open to that? So, and your partner is going to know you in ways that you don't know yourself because they're the ones who are with you, right? So it's important for us to be open to hearing their feedback too, because they're going to know it more than anybody else's. So when we're trying to change someone, it usually comes out in negative ways. Okay. The only conditions under which anyone learns are conditions of incredible sweetness, tenderness, patience. That's really how we learn. And research has shown us too, like that's what works well with children in order to not damage the bond. Yeah, we can be yelling at our kids like, oh, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, all of that. Like you need to be doing this, that. Does that help? I mean, they might change in ways but it's really out of fear, and that damages the bond that you have. So that's what we sometimes do in our relationships too. We're wanting to change the other person, but we're saying it in such a negative way. And that's not how people change. Okay. So the problem is that the failures of our relationships have made us so anxious that we can't be the teachers that we should be. So therefore, some often genuine, legitimate things that we want to get across, they do come off as insults, as attempts to wound, and therefore, make the person feel rejected, and the relationship starts to chip away. So I want you guys to think about like the things that you feel like your partner struggles with. How are you even communicating it to them? You know, are you giving it? Are you letting them say it in or with sweetness, tenderness, and patience? Are you saying it like that? Or are you saying it in a harsher way? So, and nobody's saying, of course, it's not good to be attacking the person. But maybe you do have a point. You do have a point. Like there are things, it's just how are we delivering that? So I want you to be kind of mindful of that. Okay. So just something to chuckle about. There's a saying that, men marry women with the intention that they'll stay the same. And then women marry men with the idea that they'll change. I mean, I've heard it so many times. We're like, oh, he's going to change or you can change him, like all of that. But no, I mean, this is just kind of lighthearted, something funny. So, but if you think about it, okay, this is a huge generalization, obviously, but it did make a lot of sense to me. And even in terms of my own life and in terms of what I see around me, where there is some of that, like just wanting to change the person. So what Debutan says is that in regards to this, both genders really want to change each other in ways. and they both have an idea of who their partner should be. So I'm curious, do you guys feel like you have an idea of who your husband should be, who your wife should be? You know, maybe you had that when you were first married or younger, and then now you have a different view, you know. I want you to think, do I honestly have like, oh, well, they should be like this, they should be like that, you know? And a useful exercise that some psychologists, you know, give feuding couples is if you could accept that your partner would never change, how would you feel about it? Like, let's say whatever drives you nuts, okay, just just triggers you, like bothers you, irritates you all the time. Like, how would you feel if you could accept that they could never change? How would you feel about that? Okay. So just think about it, because you know what? It's not easy to change. And so to be thinking, can I accept this person? And that's something that I've actually, I mean, asked couples, you know, where I, you know, when I work with them, just, can you accept this? And that's something, everybody's different, you know, everybody has a different tolerance or different views, things, deal breakers or different things. And so just something to be thinking about. So, all right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about pessimism. And so sometimes a certain degree of pessimism can be a friend of love. So, like I said, I'm not sitting here talking about fairy tale love and all of that. Like, I want you guys to be more realistic about what love really is, right? So sometimes a degree of pessimism can be a friend of love. So once we accept that it's actually really very hard for people to be any other way, we're sometimes readier for whatever they're bringing to us, you know, because then what that does is we don't need people to be perfect, and that's the good news. But if you go into a relationship thinking, oh, like, I really want to change them, or I really want this or that, want them to be like this or that, it's just going to be, the love is going to be harder, because we have to accept, you know what, it's very hard for people to change, just like it's very hard for us sometimes to change certain things. And so when we go into a relationship knowing this, even though it sounds pessimistic, it's actually, we're readier for whatever challenges are coming to us. Okay. And then we don't need people to be perfect, and that's the good news. So what we do need, what we would like, is that the people can explain their imperfections to us in good time, you know, before they've hurt us too much with them, and then with a certain degree of humility. And that's already an enormous step. So I want you all to think, if you've ever done this. Have you ever explained? Well, first, have you identified your own shortcomings? Okay. Or is it easier to always be identifying your partner's shortcomings, right? Have you identified your own shortcomings and explained them to your partner with some humility? And then even ask for grace or understanding, you know? I mean, I have couples who I see where, like, let's say if maybe the husband is struggling with some mild depression or something, and then, I mean, this is having a case right now like that. And then, you know, he's wanting to get help and to work on things because he does slack off a little bit on the home duties, you know, the tasks at home. And, you know, he says in session to the wife, like, you know, I do recognize that I am not doing what I should be doing, you know, and I just, you know, can you just be a little patient with me? And this is my plan then of what I'm going to be doing to take care of it. Like, have you guys ever talked to your partner like that? Because then what it shows is it validates their feeling, and it shows that you really are thinking about how they're feeling about it. At the same time, you're expressing your own struggle with it. So that can definitely help, or you explain your own shortcomings to your partner with some humility, you know, not being defensive or ego or pride or whatever, and then ask for grace or for understanding, you know. And I know for with this couple I'm talking about in particular, it helps because then the wife sees, oh, okay, like my husband is communicating to me, he's acknowledging my feelings, and he's telling me, like, he's asking me for some grace, because you know what, I'm going to give him some grace and understanding, because I'm going to need that too at times too, you know? So it's an act of love to be able to do that. So I know it's a lot to ask, but it's also very reasonable. So if we could have this in our minds early enough in a relationship, you know, what do you think it would do for your relationship? That, okay, people are not going to be, it's not going to be so easy to change. It's not my job to change them. and just to be generous. Like I think it would help you even going into it. Okay. So even when you first meet someone, okay, I know this is going to seem like little, I'm just going to be a little lighthearted here, right? But hopefully you get what I'm talking about. So even when you first meet someone, instead of showing off or, putting your best foot forward, what if someone says, "Hey, how are you crazy? I'm crazy like this," Like, what if you were to share that? Like, these are my quirks. What are yours? Instead of like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I'm like this," like you are just being real. And that's the thing. This is the thing. I've actually had people, okay, this was even, and okay, obviously I'm a marriage therapist, right? Back in the day, this was even before I was even a therapist. I remember, you know how people like in Islam, like they'll get married, they'll like talk, find matches, whatever. And I remember I had this one friend and she said, "Oh, like, I'm not gonna like share any of those things in the beginning." Like, no, that's not how you're gonna get someone. But then I just thought in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh, like you're kind of then posing, or like you're pretending to be one way. And then what? When you're in the relationship, what's gonna happen? It's just gonna be more challenging, right? So like what if you were to say like, "Okay, how are you crazy?" And I mean it in like a lighthearted way. "I'm crazy like this," like to be able to even share some of that. I mean, you could even talk about it with your husband and or wife now, and you guys can even have a laugh about it. Like, these are my issues, yes. And we're just keeping it real, okay? Instead of, oh, like I'm presenting this way and then hiding all of this other stuff. Because then when you get in the relationship, all of that stuff is going to come up anyway. So there should be a mutual acceptance that two damaged people, and I'm saying this in a lighthearted way too, so hopefully you guys can understand that, are trying to get together. And pretty much all of us, and there are very few totally healthy people out there, okay? But pretty much all of us reach adult age with some wounds and scars, okay? So we're going to have our own wounds that are gonna come out in the relationship. And that's why I'm so glad that you guys are here, because you are taking an interest in working on yourself and your relationship so that we can have healthier children, because they're going to be seeing what we're doing. And so hopefully they can be the few healthy people, and maybe there will be more healthy people, because mental health is obviously getting more prevalent. And so, but we just have to be real about it, that most of us are damaged in our own ways. Okay. So when you say to someone, "This is how I am, I'm crazy, this is how you're crazy." Oh, okay, good. Then we can accept how we are. And then we're just going to try our best. That's what we're going to do. So it gives you more of that realistic perception, right? Even though it sounds pessimistic, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, just more realistic. Okay. So sometimes we bring to adult relationships some of the same hope that even a young child has of their parents. That, of course, in an adult relationship, it's not going to be the same as parent-child. It's got to accept that the person on the other side is just a human being, okay, full of flaws, fears, and they're not some superhuman. So sometimes what I'm seeing in my practice is that, sometimes the partner like, "Oh, I want him to be like this or her like this or that or whatever." You can't be everything. They're just a flawed individual too, just like you, and they're not going to be superhuman. That's a lot of pressure to put on someone. Okay. So when you first start to like someone, we usually magnify in our minds, oh, these things are immediately so enrapturing, and we have this idea of who that person is. In the beginning, around these wonderful qualities. The thing is, it's not necessarily fair to them or to us, because then we put them in this image and then we hold them to that standard when it's just not realistic. It's just, yes, they can have these wonderful qualities. At the same time, they're going to have their wounds and scars or their own craziness on the other side. So, okay. And so when we get like, oh, so excited about all of these things, and we have this idea, then what it does is like we feel like we know them already, and we impose on them an idea of who they are, when of course we actually don't. So, and I'm sure those of you who have been married for some time, you realize, oh, okay, in the beginning, oh, I thought I knew so much. I know I was like this too, but you learn so much more when you live with somebody. You learn so much more when you have children with somebody. So just know in the beginning, like that's definitely not who the person is solely, you know? So all right, so next we're going to talk about being in a sulk. So I'm sure that many of you have sulked before. So I want to bring up this phenomenon of being in a sulk. So it's actually a very fascinating situation if you think about it, because we don't sulk with everybody. So think, and if you want to write in the chat, you can, like, who is it that you sulk with? And you guys know what sulking is. It's like when you're really like pouting, you're withdrawn, you're like, obviously in a negative mood. So if you think about it, we only get into sulks with people that we feel should understand us, but rather unforgivably haven't understood us. So you're not going to sulk with everyone. You're only going to sulk with people who you really feel, oh, they should understand me, but then they don't, and you're not really being forgiving about it. Okay. So when we're in an intimate relationship with someone, we take particular offense to when they get things wrong, right? Um, and I want to let you know, and I've seen this so many times. I've seen this, you know, with people, not only, I mean, like just with, people I work with, but also just even just in my personal life too. It's a very infantile need, okay, that the person should know what's in my mind without me needing to tell them. And because sometimes we think if I need to spell it out to you, then that means you don't love me. Okay. So who here has felt this before? Like where you think, oh, well, you should just know. If you love me, like, oh, you should just know. I shouldn't have to say it. I've heard that so many times and with couples, like even kids say that too, to be honest. I want to let you guys know it's a very infantile need. The only time that you can expect the person just knows is when you're an infant. That's why it's an infantile need, because when you're an infant, you cry. Oh, your parents know, okay, maybe they want food or they're hungry, diaper change or attention or whatever. Like that's the only time. But once you can start using your words, that's when you have to be doing it. So just think like, oh, like when I have sulked about something, it's probably because you're having this infantile need, like the person should just understand and should just know, and they're not getting it. Okay. So I want you guys, if one thing you can get, I mean, one of the things you can take away is don't say to someone, you should just know, or I shouldn't have to tell you. No, communicate. Okay. Um, so it's like when you ask your partner, if something's wrong and they say, mm-mm, like, so no, not really, because you expect that they should just be able to read into your soul and know what's wrong. And this is an extraordinary demand. It's very unfair to the other person. Okay. So just think like, do I do this in my relationship? And how can I then be aware of it and then not do it? Because this is going to help me get better at the skill of love as we're talking. Okay. So when we see it in children, like children literally think that parents can read their minds, it takes them a long time to realize that the only way a person can really learn about another person is if it's explained to them using calm words. Okay. Because sometimes I also see where like maybe you are communicating to the other person, but it's not in a calm tone. Instead, you're coming off as attacking, right? And then when you're coming off as attacking, I've seen it with client couples all the time where they're like, oh, we've talked about this so much, so many times, and it doesn't make a difference. And you know why? When I see them talking about it or like arguing about it in session, I'm like, oh, I see why it doesn't make a difference, because the other person isn't really hearing because you're not talking in a calm way. I see the dance that these couples do in their relationship. Okay. So don't expect the other person to just understand and to just know. Use your words. This is what we say to children. I say to my kids are young. I say to them, use your words. I need to understand. Otherwise, I can't understand. Okay. So, so we operate with this mad idea that love is just intuitive understanding, right? It just does not and will set you up for, major disappointment. So no one can intuitively understand you, understand another person beyond just quite like a limited range of topics, you have to be able to use your words. And like I said, like try to use it in a calm way. And once again, in order to do that, don't blame the other person. Oh, you made me mad. Take responsibility and accountability for your own stuff, okay? Your own emotions. Okay, so this is another tip that I think can help in learning the skill of love, how to be better at love, is treating your partner like children. Okay. So hear what I have to say in regards to this. So this is the work of love. So one of the kindest things that you can do with your partner is to see them as children in a way where we are generous in the way of how we interpret their behavior. Okay. I literally just talked to, I think, 3 couples this week about it, about how they can look at their partner as in a, as a child in a way. So, for example, your kid comes home and they say, I hate you, or, I don't want to talk, they're like just in such a bad mood, right? So you immediately go, okay, that's not true. They're probably tired, hungry, upset. Maybe something happened at school, with their friends or whatever. So what we're doing is we're looking around for a benevolent interpretation to their behavior. And we do this often with kids, but seldomly with adults, right? So, like, even though, yes, the kid is like just saying negative things or like being snippy or being in a bad mood, we're not taking it so personally. Instead, we're thinking, oh, something must have happened at school or something's going on, right? So, when your partner says or does something hurtful, can you understand? Wait, this is not about me. It's what's going on inside of them today. So how many of you have ever done this? Where like they're snippy, like, like, or just talking in a bad mood, or maybe you just ask like, oh, or doesn't even ask, just demand something. What do we usually do? Our problem is that we take things completely personally. This is another big thing that I work with couples about, is how to depersonalize. So if your partner is saying something, and of course, if it's how they always are, that's different. But if like once in a while they are just snippy or like, saying something that is mean and but not really part of who they are, really who they are, then how can we look at them as children in a way where we have a more generous understanding of what's going on in their behavior? We have a generous interpretation of their behavior. Like, oh, there must be something going on. So I think for you guys, like for that's something that could help is, of course it's a different relationship, parent child and, husband wife. At the same time, can we sometimes pause and not always personalize and think, wait, that's not about me? Because when you depersonalize how it helps you is you don't react in kind. Instead, you're just like, oh, okay, there must be something going on. Okay, let me just keep it moving. It's okay. And that is part of the work of love, is to try to go behind the front of this challenging behavior. So whatever, like the snippiness or the bad mood or whatever, and try to ask where it might have come from in your own mind. Like, oh, maybe they're really stressed at work, or maybe there's a lot of challenges with their elderly parents or something, like try to be generous in your interpretation. Like, I think that can really help couples in ways because it's not always personal. We have to learn how to depersonalize. And so love is doing that work, is to ask oneself, where is this rather aggressive, pained, non-communicative, unpleasant behavior coming from? So even though it's not fun to be around, nobody's saying you're excusing it. What you're doing though is you're not personalizing it, and you're having a more generous interpretation of that behavior, just like we would do with our kids. Okay. So I mentioned, the word pessimism before, talking about being pessimistic. What it really means is viewing love as reality based as opposed to ideal based. Okay. So some of the important truths are, you're crazy. We are all deeply damaged people. So that's important to know. Okay. And then the great enemy of love in good relationships and friendships is self-righteousness. Okay. So what this means is, like, if we accept that we're just holding it together, and in many ways, like really quite challenging people, like all of us are like that. Okay. So we don't want to be self-righteous. Like, that's a great enemy of love. We're like, oh, well, my way is better, or this is how, that's not going to help in a relationship. Okay. Instead, can we accept that we are all just holding it together? And in many ways, all of us are really quite challenging people. So, and maybe some of you have thought this, if someone ever thinks they're easy to live with, they are by definition going to be pretty hard because they don't have much understanding of themselves. you know? So own your own stuff. Don't just think, oh, well, I'm so easy. I'm so easy. That means you don't really have much self-awareness, okay? Because you're going to be challenging in your own ways, okay? So own your own stuff. Once again, that's you taking accountability for your own challenges, your own growing edges, and not just putting it on the other person, okay? So wisdom in a relationship is knowing that you, just like everybody else, is pretty difficult. Okay. And like I said, I'm not trying to be so pessimistic, yet at the same time, there is some level of pessimism, especially compared to the conditioning that we've been told with all these stories of love and fairy tales and all of that stuff. Okay. Like, so it does seem like that. It's just what we're trying to do is be more reality based instead of ideal based. Okay. All right. So, and our parents usually don't tell us what our issues are. Our friends don't. They just kind of keep us in this bubble of ignorance because about our own natures, right? I mean, of course, I know like some parents would never think anything. I see a lot of moms where their sons can do no wrong or anything, but it's like, no, that's doing a disservice, right? So our partners will definitely tell us, and can we be open to hearing their perspective then? And not just shutting it down because maybe nobody else said that to you. Well, that's because they're not in an intimate relationship with you. Okay. All right. But sometimes it's in our 40s, as we get older, we start to think, oh, maybe some of the problems are in me. Okay. That's a step forward if you're thinking that, because it's so intuitive for all of us to think, oh, it's the other person. It's not me. Oh, it's the other person, but that's not going to help you learn this skill of love, okay? Is be willing to look at your own self and owning your own stuff. So begin with the sense of I'm quite tricky in these ways. So that brings in the self-awareness. It's a grading starting point for being good at love, knowing where your own challenges are. Okay. And even, yeah, if you guys have been married for years, you can still, I would say it would still be good to even reflect on these things, and even talk to your partner about it, talk to your husband or wife about it, and from a place of humility. And hopefully you guys can even have a good conversation about it. Um, so often we blame our partners instead of blaming our view of love. We think, oh, well, they're failing or they're faltering. But that's because our view of love is a certain way that, oh, they need to be like this, when that's not reality. Okay. So that turns into this perfect person doesn't exist, and in fact is the enemy of good enough relationships. So what we want the relationship to be good enough, not obviously perfect. Is it good enough? And this doesn't mean, so the aim is not for perfection, it's for a good enough situation. If you look at a lot of the researchers, in relationships and couples, they always say, like, find somebody who's good enough, right? And that's going to look different for different people. So nobody says, hey, when they ask, oh, what are you looking for in a partner? And if someone says, oh, just someone who's good enough, you know, you think, oh my gosh, they're so negative. Like they just say, oh, someone who's good enough. But in fact, for a human, that's brilliant because it's the attitude we should have. Instead of finding like, oh, it's our better half or our other half or whatever. No, if someone's saying that, then okay, this is not, I got to go the other direction. Instead, someone who's good enough is just more reality based, and it's actually wiser. So, okay. But once again, it's the antithesis of the messages that we are usually sent about what love is in a relationship and all these fairy tales. Okay. All right. So now we're going to talk a little bit about loneliness. And so one of the greatest sorrows we sometimes have in love, and those of you who have been in relationships, you probably have felt this before, is the feeling that our partner doesn't understand parts of us. Okay, and it can make us feel really lonely in a relationship. There's actually a certain kind of bravery and heroic acceptance of loneliness. It seems to be one of the key ingredients to being able to form a good relationship, is when you can accept, you know what? My partner is not going to understand everything about me. And there's going to be moments of beautiful connection, but at the same time, I have to be modest of how often this will actually happen. And the reason is because you guys are two separate people, two separate entities, have probably had different life experiences. Even if you're from the same culture or community, I've seen people can still be very different in ways. So Your partner is not going to always see things the way you do. They're not going to understand everything that you're thinking or what you're into or whatever. And if you can accept going into the relationship that there's going to be part of my life, there's going to be some loneliness there because my partner is not going to get it all the time, you know? And not only your partner, even your friends and family, even your parents, you know? So what Alain de Botton says is that if you're lonely with about 40% of your life, that's pretty good, okay? Because you learn you're going to have to endure some of these parts without echoes from those who you love. Okay, so if you're going into a relationship like that, you're not so disappointed that, oh, well, they just don't get it. They just don't get it, right? Of course, if it's more than that, probably more than 50%, then that's something to re-examine, you know, but just knowing that there's going to be times where they're just not going to get it and that's okay. It's just part of being a human being, okay? All right, so now we're going to be talking about connection. So don't only think about love in romantic relationships. You know, there's another way of looking at love, which is just it's connection, connection with others. You know, we as human beings are hardwired to seek connections with others, right? So love is connection. That's what makes us feel alive. That's really how most people they thrive. You know, even if you like I know I remember reading like research has shown that like babies like orphanages in Russia, you know, like babies who they haven't been touched, they don't have any connection, they die because it's just such a, you know, sad to say, it's just such a part of being a human being is having that connection, right? So, so it's safe to say that in relationships, they're not necessarily the place where we encounter our best selves in the intimate relationships, because getting into a relationship with someone is a hard job, and most people they fail. You know, even in our community, in the Muslim community, it is where like there's divorce happening. You know, it's more common than it was before. You know, so because when you're asking someone to marry you, you're asking for a lot. Okay, you're asking for a chauffeur, a co-host, a co-parent, a sexual partner, an accountant, etc., on and on. And we fail because it's a burden. It is a lot on somebody, okay? So in understanding this, one of the nicest and mature things you can do is to just let them be sometimes, okay? Don't impose yourself and your way of thinking, your way of self-righteousness, all of that on the other person because you're challenging in your own ways. All right. I know for me, I've had to definitely think about that too. Like, oh, I think, oh, well, this is how it should be, or this is how, you know, and just know, okay, like it's a lot to ask of somebody to, once again, like we talked about, change or to be different. And so if we can work on just letting them be, of course, in safety and boundaries, and there's things like that, you know, then that's one of the most mature things you can do is just let them be. And it's not easy to be doing that, you know, especially when we have a certain idea of how things should be. So, all right. So the definition of marriage ends up as a hopeful, generous, infinitely kind gamble taken by two people who don't know yet who they are or who the other might be, and they're binding themselves together to a future that they cannot conceive of and have carefully avoided investigating. Okay. All right. So that's what it is. It's two people who are flawed, who are coming together. They don't know themselves yet. I know for me, I mean, I've been married now 10 years. For me in the beginning, oh, I thought, oh, I know myself so well, whatever after these 10 years, and of course, I am someone who's introspective and stuff, and I just think, oh my gosh, I'm just getting to know so much more about my own self and my own stuff, like things from my own past and all of that. And it's really us trying to just come together and binding it together, you know? So it's contrary to the romantic view of relationships, of love, and this realism and acceptance of complexity, it's ultimately the friend of love, is just knowing there's so much complexity here. And how can we learn the skill of love to, you know, get through the challenges and even appreciate the beauty that it has to offer and to teach us, you know? So when you're really being honest, if you ask yourself, like let's say And I'm not saying that, everybody should stay in a relationship all the time. No, and that you should be accepting over everything and just let people be like that. No, of course, there's legitimate reasons for people to leave too. So I want to make sure that that's pointed out too. But when you're really being honest in a relationship, I want you to ask, like, if your partner does something or something's not going the way you want, ask, why am I in pain right now? And an emotionally mature person is going to say, you can't attribute all of your sorrows, okay, that you're feeling to your partner. You can't. You have to recognize that some of these things are endemic to existence, to being a human being. All human beings, or something within yourself, then what you're doing is encountering the pain of life with another person. But it's not necessarily because of the other person. Okay, it's so easy. Like I said, it's so inherent in us to point the finger at somebody else and to say, oh, well, you're the cause of this. You're making me mad, or all this. That's not going to help you in love. I'm telling you guys, okay? It's not going to be helping you. Instead, can you recognize that some of these things are just part of being a human being? Some of this stuff is going to be within my own self. It's not all about the other person. Even 9 out of 10 times, it probably is more about you. Okay. And that when you are in pain because of maybe something that's happening in the relationship, that it's just because you're encountering this the pain of life with another person, but it's not necessarily because of the other person. Okay. And I see that with a lot of, my clients too, individuals and couples. Like, a lot of our stuff comes up when we are in an intimate relationship. And how can we even use that as information and guidance and help to what needs healing in us? I mean, that's honestly how I see it with me. I think, oh, I'm a healthy person. I work on myself. I'm a therapist. I really try to implement and apply everything that I'm talking about. Like, it's very authentic of what I'm trying to do, in my life's work. And, let's say and so sometimes I think, oh, I think I'm pretty healthy, or I think I'm healed. But then when something comes up, like something in the relationship, if like a trigger, whatever, I have a different perspective. I actually see it as, oh, this is good information because it's showing me what still needs healing, whether it's little Lubna or scared Lubna or whatever, like, it's showing what needs healing. And I use it as information. And I even appreciate the challenges sometimes that, happen between me and my husband, because it teaches me more of what I need to work on for my own self. And that's not a common way of looking at conflict, and negative feelings. But that's going to help you because then you're always growing and evolving from the challenges. So that's going to help you in love. So just be willing to look at, wait, I am in pain now, and it's not necessarily all about the other person. Some of it is in me too. Okay. So even sometimes what people do when they're having challenges in their relationship, they'll stray, they'll, maybe have infidelity or something, or they'll find somebody else. But to be honest, that is an easy way out, because what's going wrong in the marriage, it's based once again on that idealism. Like, you're just redirecting your hope of, oh, well, this other person's going to be better for me, without really looking at yourself and understanding the realities of a mature, loving relationship and being wise about it. So, okay. So I want to touch a little bit about children and children coming into a marriage. So children, they teach us so much. They teach us that love in its purest form is a kind of service. It's definitely a different kind of love. At the same time, children, without a doubt, I'm sure everyone can attest to this, they are hard on marriages. It's a lot of asking and stretching yourself, and a lot of energy that's being pulled from you that you don't always realize. I know sometimes I don't even realize how much it is taking out of me. That's why you have to really make sure you're taking care of yourself too. um, and so if there are already problems in a relationship, then they can get amplified when children are there and everybody is just tired, Even today I was like, "Oh, it's Saturday, we can sleep in." And, "Oh, who's knocking on the door?" Who. So these three little girls I have. So we have to understand that there's a lot of mundanity. So just the day-to-day stuff, like laundry, cleaning up, crumbs, bathroom, all of that. Like, who's going to do all that? Like, we have to understand that, it's not stuff we learn about in love stories by any means, but the kind of day-to-day wear and tear, like how can you guys as a couple get better at just those parts of life? A lot of marriage, it is the mundane, it is the day-to-day stuff, right? So how can, and this is the problem, is that we find, we find ourselves in relationships, and it's precisely over these areas that conflicts arise. So we need to learn how to handle these conflicts. So what can help you in the skill of, learning the skill of love is knowing how to even handle the mundane, right? Like laundry, bathroom, cleaning, all of that stuff. How can we have a system that works for our family? So, and just know that whenever people are fighting about, oh, you didn't do the dishes, whatever, it's not about the dishes. Okay. It's always about something underneath that. But if you guys can learn how to handle those day-to-day things that we don't obviously learn about in love or in fairy tales or any of that, then that's going to help, because that's a lot of relationships every day. Okay. So, all right, so just a little bit of an overview on how love really works. So just know compatibility is an achievement of love. It shouldn't be a precondition. Sometimes people, they think, oh, well, like, okay, I want to find somebody who's so compatible with me. Just know, like, you can work towards compatibility in ways like we talked about, by accepting the other person, knowing how can I bring their strengths, how can they be bringing my strengths up. So compatibility, it's an achievement of love. It shouldn't be a precondition. And the scary thing is about relationships, and I get it. I think, I mean, not only with men, but women as well, is we need to be weak in front of others. And when most of us are experts at being strong meaning like not really showing vulnerable feelings. But this is the scary thing about relationships is, what we don't know is what we don't know how to do is to make ourselves safely vulnerable. And that's going to help in a relationship, like how can you be vulnerable in ways in a safe space? And of course that takes both partners. Are we creating that safe space, where we can be vulnerable? So the success of a relationship is not having no conflict. No, it's how do we handle the conflict? And so I kind of gave you guys some tips on, how you can better handle some of this conflict or some of these challenges that come up. So I think a certain kind of pessimism and realism, which is totally compatible with also hope, laughter, good humor, a sense of fun. It doesn't have to be so dour, but like, yes, having certain kind of pessimism and realism in a relationship, that's going to help you be better at love. Just like comedy and tragedy, they belong together. So both can be true. And when you look at a relationship, the other person can be amazing, even though there are all these sorts of problems. Like, so there's space for both. Like, sometimes people think, oh, well, they're so amazing, I don't know why there's issues or whatever. No, they can be amazing at the same time, because being a human being is complex and we're all flawed. Like, there's going to be all sorts of problems too. It's just how can you learn how to better handle the conflict? And one way, important way, like I said, it's the inner work and looking at yourself. So and it's not easy for people to do that. Uh, so know that the problems, they don't have anything to do with, the other person being a deficient person. It's that what the problems have to do with is the challenges of just being a human being. Okay. Trying to relate to another human being in a loving relationship. Okay. Um, and so love is something that we have to learn, we can make progress with. It's a skill. So hopefully you guys have hope there. Like, it is a skill, it is something you can learn. It requires forbearance, generosity, imagination, and a million other things. So please resist that love must mean conflict free. It's not smooth, okay? The course of love is rocky and bumpy at the best of times, and that the best we can manage as the creatures we are. It's the best we can do as the creatures we are. It's no fault of mine or yours. It just has to do with being a human being, which is pretty complex. And the more generous that we can be towards that flawed humanity, the better chance we will have of doing the true hard work of love. So really think about the generosity in your perception of things, that's going to really make a difference. So, okay, so I know it's already been an hour. So we did that part. Okay, so that's from just kind of, oh, Oh, okay, okay. So, and then I'm just gonna quickly go over, hopefully we'll have some time for questions. I'm gonna quickly go over some 6 key ingredients that help love bloom into a thriving relationship. Okay. So I want you guys to pay attention to these and think about them and even discuss them with your partner. That would be great. So the first, so these are the 6 key ingredients of a relationship that help the love bloom into a thriving relationship. Okay, so number one, it's the mutual attraction. So, how attracted are you to the person? How drawn are you to the other person? And be clear about the points of attraction. So, it's not just like, it's not physical attraction necessarily. It can be intellect, success, values, physicality. It's not just one thing. So, like, how attracted are you to the person in, these deeper ways? And I will tell you that if attraction doesn't grow into intimacy, it will go away. Okay. So that's something to think about in our relationship. Like, how attracted are we to each other? And like I said, it's not just one thing. It can be, there's different points of attraction, like intellect, success, values, physicality, different things. Okay. And then number two, trust. So that's another key ingredient in a relationship. So this means showing up for each other consistently. Okay. Not with the where it's unpredictable. This is consistently, like, are we showing up for each other where you feel, you know what, you have my back consistently and I can rely on you. So trust is definitely, it really is the foundation. When I talk with couples, I talk about it being the foundation of a relationship. It's like, let's say if you have a house, right? The foundation of the house, if it's not a stable foundation, what are the house is going to be topsy-turvy. It's not like, so trust is really the foundation of a relationship. So we definitely need that. And you want to show up consistently and reliably. So the third ingredient is respect. So how do you feel respected? This is what I want you to even ask your partner. How do you feel respected? And be specific, because it's different for different people. And this is made real when we prioritize things that are important not only to ourselves, but to our partner, right? Understand what matters to you and how do we make that happen? Like, can you guys talk about that? Like, oh, what matters to you? What matters to me? How can we make that happen? And I want you to ask too, like, am I respectable? Am I living in my integrity? Sometimes we think, oh, we're demanding respect from the other person, but wait a minute, am I respectable? Am I living in my integrity? That's important to think about too. So when you're talking about respect, you ask your partner, how do you feel respected? I want you to be specific, not just to say, oh, well, the way you talk to me or whatever. Like, yeah, you can say that, but maybe there's certain things that really make you feel like you are being respected. So be specific about that. So the next one, the fourth one, is loving behaviors. And this is really important. I talk with couples a lot about building the cushion in a relationship, because we definitely need a cushion, something of, positive interactions. And so this loving behaviors is about being loving. So how do you feel loved? Ask your partner. How do you feel loved? And how do I show you that you're special to me? Okay. Is this something I do for everyone or is this a specific person? So I know a lot of times people, and I've even this past week with couples, I've seen it too, where like maybe the wife or the husband, they'll do something for the other person and they think it's a loving behavior, but it's actually not received by the partner in that way because they don't maybe care so much about it. And so it's where, like, no, you want to know, how can I show love to you? So kind of around the love languages too. How do you feel loved? And then think, oh, can I do some of that, right? And think about, like, what is the quality of your tenderness in your words, touch, actions? Like, those are all very loving behaviors too, okay? And mutual means, like, when the love is given, it is received by your partner, because it's not going to make as much of a difference if you're doing something loving, but it's not received by your partner. It may not be received to them in that way. So whatever you give, you want to be giving to something that is meaningful to them, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. And then the fifth key ingredient is compassion. So what this is honoring our partner's emotional experiences without making it about us. So when you're in the presence of another, you don't make it about you. Sometimes people are maybe saying, oh, something's going on that's hard, whatever. And then you say, oh, oh, that happened to me. Or, like, you just make it about you. No. Compassion is feeling for the other person, so making it about their feelings, where empathy is different, it's feeling with the person. All right. And research shows that we actually need less empathy in intimate relationships and we need more compassion. So that's honoring our partner's emotional experiences without making it about us. So I want you guys to discuss with each other, how do you feel like you do with the compassion in the relationship? All right, and the final key ingredient is a shared vision. So are our visions aligned? This is a common understanding and agreement on the future goals, values, direction of the relationship, as well as life and as a couple. So shared vision, I think that's definitely important. So I would say I would challenge you guys, go for a walk, have a conversation around these 6 ingredients. You could even, I mean, once I send them to you, you can have them to look at and just talk about like, okay, well, how do we do with each of these? Where can we do better? What are our strengths and what are our weaknesses? And these ingredients, they involve action, which is verbal and physical. Okay, so how can we convey all of these ingredients through touch too? That goes a long way. Like, it's so important. um, so the big takeaways for today is to debunk the myth that love is about finding our other half. I want you guys to recognize the difference between a love story versus a life story, right? And even though love can be a beautiful part of a relationship, building a life together requires a different set of ingredients and aspirations. It takes work, which is to create that life story. It involves the practicalities, challenges, and a shared journey of building a long-term relationship. Okay. So my challenge to you is to really take what you learned, take what you know, and really try to embody it. There's so much. I know I gave a lot of information, and information can only do you good, but it's not really going to do you good unless you're using it, right? So please, if there's even one thing, one baby step, something from today that you can take to build the cushion in your relationship, to better your relationship, I'm telling you, it is going to be moving you forward. And like I said, it affects our whole quality of life, not just the relationship part of it. Okay. All right. Well, so we are done there. I know it's a lot of information. And so we do have some time for questions. And so, Nadrat, we can, if there's any questions, we can talk a little bit.
I don't see any questions or anything at this point. That was very good, mashallah. A lot of points, though,
I
Lubna,
know
I
it's a
want to
lot of points, a
say.
lot to take in. I'll,
It
I'll just
was
kind of send you
not
guys bullet points and stuff so you can have that.
okay, even though I was writing some things, but it's a lot compressed in one
Mhm.
article or
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
the book or whatever it was. But it is very deep. Each of it has to be taken its time and given
Mhm.
its due time. So
Mhm.
thank you, Jazakallah khair, for coming in today and shedding light over this. I think there is some question.
Okay.
So I'm going to read it loud and then you can answer it. Or I don't know if it's really a question or a comment, but not many times being patient of a partner's shortcomings translate into them improving.
Mhm.
In that context, do you think the notion of accepting a partner's shortcomings is somehow contradictory to the concept of jihad and nafs, or like striving to be a better Muslim or a better person in general?
Mhm. Yeah, you know what? And I think, I mean, it depends what the shortcoming is, because you have to kind of think like, is this something that I can accept, or it's something that I can't. So I think part of the challenges that we have in the relationship is when we're not happy with a certain behavior, how is that growing us in any way? So I really would encourage, the person to be thinking, wait, is this growing me in some way, this challenge, that maybe I'm not looking at it, from that perspective. Like I will say, like sometimes clients, like couples that I work with, they will say, oh, well, if I'm just forgiving about this or accepting of this, then it's just letting the other person kind of get away with whatever they're doing. That's one way of looking at it. another way, and I always bring it back to the individual person, is what is it teaching you? It's teaching you to be flexible. It's teaching you to be okay, that things don't have to be exactly the way I need it to be for me to be okay. So what are you gaining from that? So I mean, it depends on the specific like behavior. Uh, but I think I would encourage you guys, like if you are accepting a shortcoming of your partner, think, is this growing me in any way? Instead of me thinking, oh, well, they're getting away with a certain thing, is it growing me in any way, right? And like I said, there are legitimate reasons when you should leave a relationship too, so it just depends on the specifics there, but that's kind of what just generally I would just say, like, think about, how am I growing in this way? How is it helping me in my life by accepting this shortcoming, if at all? Because sometimes there is that. So.
There's another question. How can we help our children growing up in this world of fantasy and fairy tale environment where the reality of love for their own better
Mhm.
love life?
Oh, I love that question. That's a great question. So I would say, and this is something I do with my own kids, in my own family, is what we want to do is we want to model. We can argue, like you can argue in front of your kids, of course, like in a healthy way, hopefully. And what I want you to do is to repair in front of them too. Okay. So like I want you, so that's how you can teach them, because this is why, this is such important work, being in a loving relationship or trying to have as healthy a relationship as possible, because you guys are your kids' first school of love. I'm very passionate about this. You guys are your kids' first school of love. So they are watching, they are learning, they are soaking everything in that you're doing. So if you want to teach your kids how to, like, the realities of the work of love, then you have to be showing them that yes, there's going to be loving moments. At the same time, there's going to be some conflict too. And of course, you want to shield them from like really extreme or negative conflict, right? But if there is some, like if you're snippy or something, or, like, it's okay if it happens in front of them. It's just, are you also teaching them how to repair in front of them? I've had clients where, adult clients where they said, "Oh yeah, my parents, they end up getting divorced or whatever." But I was so surprised because I didn't know, because the parents, they shielded everything. They didn't show any conflict. And then the kid doesn't know how to even have a conversation about feelings or communicate. So that's, even though I get why the parents are doing that, it's a disservice to them. So this is where I want you to be mindful. Like even for me, let's say, if something, I mean, I've definitely done this before where, like, if maybe I snapped at my husband or something happened, and I think about it, of course, sometimes it takes me a minute to kind of bounce back. And then I will intentionally wait until I see my in front of my kids, and I will apologize. I'll say, "Hey, you know what? I'm sorry that I snapped at you. That was uncalled for, and I shouldn't have done that. I just assumed maybe this or that, and I'm sorry, I shouldn't have treated you that way, or yelled at you like that or something. And they're seeing it. They're watching. And so if you can do that, that's a healthy thing. So we're teaching our kids, you're not going to always be happy with your partner, and how are you modeling it, or how are you repairing it? Okay. Just like we talk about feelings, how to do it with your own feelings, model it in front of them. You guys are their first school of love. Show them that there is love there, like I said, with the tenderness of your touch, your words, your actions, all of that. Like, they're soaking this in, because then they're going to be wiser, and, they don't have to come to the talk because they're going to be knowing more, right? So this is their first school of love, really. So that's what I would say, is making sure that even if there's arguments in front, of course, you want to try to keep them as tame as possible when they're there, model it in front of them as well.
A very nice thought there, because a lot of parents, I'm sure they think that, kids shouldn't be seeing
Right.
adults argue or
Right.
have a
It's,
conflict
yeah,
or disagreement
right.
or something like that, or getting upset at each other, or but that's a part of life, that's a
Right.
part
It's a
of being
part of
human.
life, and it is a disservice to your children by
Yeah.
not letting them see anything. It really is. So, of course, be mindful of what they're seeing, and
Yeah.
then make sure you're repairing in front of them where they're seeing you apologize to your partner. Well, where they're saying, "Hey, I'm sorry. That was not right of me to do it. I did snap or I assumed this or that or, like it's so important for them to be seeing it. And you can be saying it to them too. It's important too. So,
And especially, I think, for kids also to understand that parents are not perfect parents.
oh yeah, yeah. Oh, there's
You
definitely an
know,
age, I think. I know for me when I don't remember what age I was, but it's like you kind of go through a stage where you're like, "Oh, wait, my parents aren't perfect. My parents don't know everything." I don't remember what age that was, probably elementary school at some point. But it's a transition because first you're just like, "Oh my gosh, you're amazing, everything God's greatest gift to mankind, but then they realize, "Oh, wait, you're just a person." You know?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
important for them to be seeing that too, you know,
yeah.
for sure. So yeah, so I just want to, emphasize to you guys that it's so important. Please do this work on your relationships because it is, like I said, for the kids, it is a school of, you are their first school of love. They're going to be learning so much from you. And by you investing in this, you're investing in future generations. You are going to get the biggest return on your investment when you invest on your relationship with your own self, your own inner work and your relationship. So that's why I'm very passionate about this topic. And I mean, just even your own personal relationship with yourself, because you are investing the more love that you can have in your own home, in your own self, then you're going to be pouring that into them and they're going to have that to pour into their in future generations. So you're going to be getting the most return on your investment. It's not easy work. It's constant work. It is worth it. So
Thank you. Jazakallah khair again. I mean, it is very good insight. I like that point that you mentioned. You have to draw the line what is acceptable to you, what is not. If the other person's not, you know, um, changing or however you want to approach that, we can we can learn from that. I think a good important point would be to also get an Islamic perspective of it. I think that would be also very beneficial because we relate marriage is 50% of our deen, and it's not just said that it is a relationship which is very, it must be through its difficulties and
that's
challenges,
right.
right? And
Right. There's
brings a lot of humility in you, a lot of your own faults and a lot of your own things that come up. And
right.
it's important. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us first and help me first while I'm talking to change myself here and
Right.
accept
Be
and
willing to look at yourself. Yeah.
yeah, accept and change. And may Allah help us and guide us through this. And thank you so much for this. And we will, inshallah, see you again with another wonderful topic.
For sure.
And Jazakallah khair. If you do have any, there's another. Can you talk on more what you meant of being safely vulnerable?
Okay. So safely vulnerable. So what that means is when you're going underneath like your deeper emotions and you're sharing it with your partner, you know? Like let's say maybe maybe my husband said something to me and it hurt my feelings and I can go to him and I can say, "Hey, I just want to let you know like I felt hurt when you said this or when you did this." Like you're expressing your underlying feeling instead of, what did I say? Closing up, giving the silent treatment, it's where you're being vulnerable and to be able to even express that vulnerable feeling. Okay. And that's not easy. A lot of times we're taught to, oh, like if you express feelings, oh, then you're weak, or if you let it affect you, then you're weak. I mean, especially I think men are socialized, boys are socialized to be like that. Now I think it's getting better. It's just in our culture too. It's and community, it's where we're not very encouraging of that, so to be safely vulnerable is to really be able to identify, even especially with anger. So this is a thing, I think maybe I've talked about this before, how anger is a secondary feeling. You always feel something underneath, whether that's fear, shame, guilt, hurt, sadness. But the reason it comes off as anger is because we think anger protects us, right? So like if you say something to me and it hurts my feelings, I get mad. I'm like, oh, who do you think you are? Because I want to protect myself. But really, I need to dig deeper what's underneath the anger and to express it. Like, you know what? I felt hurt when you said that to me or when you treated me like that. That's where you're being more vulnerable. You're actually expressing your underlying feeling. And that's how you're not then living in that state of anger. You're actually getting to the root of the feeling, and then you can release it after you've expressed it in a healthy, safe way. And I will say, like, it takes two parties, like it takes both partners to be able to create that safe, nurturing, loving environment where you can be vulnerable. And that's why, I mean, couples, a lot of couples I see, because maybe they don't know how to do that outside of the session, they'll save it for the session just so that they know it's like a safer place. Obviously, I'm here to help kind of guide the conversation. But I would love for you guys to be able to do that on your own, where you can share your underlying feelings in a safe way. And it's not easy to do that. So many times we just kind of push it aside, or we pretend we're tough and all of that, or we're just angry, and then that's not going to be healthy. So having that safe vulnerability is important in a relationship too.
Thank you. I think that answers all our questions. If you have anything else in particular about this or anything, I think Lubna shared her email address and we can get in touch with her. And I'm sure you're open for therapy also, and you have shared your details in case people need any additional counseling or anything like that. In that case, feel free to
Yeah.
reach out to her, inshallah.
Yeah.
And
And if you guys ever see, like, or if there's, from the community, if there are certain topics or anything that you think would be really beneficial for us to speak on, that's really important for us as providers to know too.
yeah, I think from that aspect, also, as well as I think the
Right.
imams and the sheikh
Yeah.
would also know, because a lot of people reach out to them also for help and guidance and counseling. So I think that's another thing. But I definitely think in this day and age, parenting as well as
Mhm.
relationships,
Right. Just
very
our
important,
job. Yeah. Mhm.
very important, just balancing everything. The act of doing that with our lives being so busy with everything else and the distractions around, and all the other things that we want to do, as much as we want to do them well, it's hard. And
Right, right. That's why let's just try our best. Understand we're going to be flawed. Your
so
partner's
there's somebody
flawed.
asking for a topic. Maybe in the future we can, asking how to raise boys to become a better men for the relationship around them.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
one of the things is that as a community and as a culture, for us, men don't have that much of a vocabulary to express
I know.
themselves well, and especially maybe to women. Or I think, I mean, maybe that's how it is, because, and even women, because we think differently, and men in an aspect do have different thought process over certain things. So I think both ways that there is a difference, and to teach that to the children would be
Mhm.
very, very important, because our
Yeah.
goal is not to separate the men from the women, but to rather teach what is the healthier way of treating and dealing with each other. So,
Right, right. Yeah, right. For sure. It's so important. So I don't have any sons. I have three girls.
well, then,
Maybe someone else can maybe do that topic, but I think that's a great one.
well, if you have colleagues, anybody else
There's
who
definitely
really
a need. And yeah, I think that it's so important. Yeah.
is
For
important,
men to
yeah.
learn how to be doing feelings and communicating, and yeah, be good partners.
Well, I have a boy too, and I can tell you we are all in need. I really need that. I wish
Yeah,
I could
yeah. That's good to know. Okay,
tell
that's
them better. So. All
Yeah.
right. Thank you.
Of course, yeah. Well, I'm so glad that I could come and you guys participated and everything. I think it's like I said, very
Jazakallah
passionate
khair.
about this, and hopefully you can do something, even if it's one thing, that we talked about today, and just try to just take a baby step forward.
Inshallah. Okay, we will conclude with the dua. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Until the next month, inshallah, we will see you and we'll work on these topics, inshallah, next time. Jazakallah khair.
Okay. Salam.
Assalam.